a little bit of the history of halacha. Which means we're going to go back to the sources and see how the halacha developed from the Tanakh through the second Bet HaMikdash, through the Talmud, until we get to where we are today. So some of it's going to be somewhat textual, but we'll go step by step. And please jump in and ask any questions if you're confused about anything. So nowadays, we know we can't own Hamets. But what about seeing Hamets? Are you allowed to see Hamets? Or just say yes?
Okay, that's what the Torah.
I'm just asking you practically today.
Torah, Joe.
Back in the olden days when we used to walk in Manhattan on the streets, right? And you're walking a street during Passover, and you will go to a pretzel stand, right? And you see the pretzels, or maybe you even smell the pretzels. Are you violating a law?
So are you saying your own Hamets or other people's Hamets?
Other people's Hamets. Are you violating any law if you see Hamets on Pesach that you don't own?
No, shouldn't.
No, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right. This would not be a problem, obviously. Otherwise, I mean, how would we live? You would have to just stay home and not look at anything. So actually, this year we could do it, right? But most years, you can't prevent other people from walking around with a sandwich. Right, you're going to go attack people in the street if they have some chametz. That's what it makes sense. Okay, so generally now you can see chametz, you can smell chametz. You just can't own it, and you can't eat it or get any benefit from it. But as Mo said, this is a good point. The Torah actually does say lo yeda'eh. So I'm going to share a source sheet with you here, so we can look at this together. Okay.
Rabbi, you're not allowed to look at you see Hamets in your home, right?
Well, this is a good question. What if you don't own it? Can you see Hamets in your home that you don't own?
If we sell,
you're getting cut off, but I'll jump in for you. For example, let's say a worker comes to your home. The plumber comes, to fix a leak in your house, and he brings his lunch with him in his bag, right? Is that a problem? And then he takes it out. He takes a lunch break, and he's sitting in your home.
It's not yours.
Sandwich, right? Is that a problem?
No, it's not yours.
Not yours, right? It's not yours. So as long as he.
What if a piece of the sandwich falls off and it stays in your house?
Okay, that's a problem, right? If he drops a piece, and then then he goes and then it's kind of yours because it's left over in your house. So then that would be a problem because you own it, you don't want it, so you have to get rid of it quickly, throw it out, burn it, whatever it is. So I mean that's why we would generally, try to make sure that we people don't bring, even our housekeepers. Technically, our housekeepers could eat chametz that they own if they wanted to. We ask them not to because of precisely that reason. There's some leftovers. There's pieces that fall off that we don't want to have in our home. Okay, but technically, someone can bring their own chametz into our home, and they own it, and it's not our problem.
But Rabbi, if I sell my Hamets and now I leave out the bottle of scotch or something else that's Hamets, but it's sold, it's not mine, but it's in my house.
Exactly. So that's the same thing, right? So as long as you sell that, so most people do that. We sell our chametz. It's still in our house, but we sold it, so it's not a problem. Is it a problem that you can't see it? So that's what you're asking. What if you leave it
Correct.
out? Or if it's in a cabinet that has glass window and you can still see it, right?
Yeah,
is that a violation?
In the freezer on a different shelf, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Okay.
So our custom is to hide it away. We even will cover plates, even things that are not edible, that are not kasher lePesach. So our custom is to hide it away, not to see it. That is the general custom. It's a good custom, so that you as a protection, so you don't come to eat it. But technically, the halacha is if you had a bag of pita that you sold to a non-Jew, you could technically leave it on your dining room table and see it, but it's not yours, so you don't have to worry about it. I don't recommend that, obviously.
Got it. No, we don't recommend it, but I'm just asking the question. Got it.
Right. Okay. So nowadays we don't prohibit seeing it. So now I want to go back to the Torah and think about why does the Torah say lo yira'eh? Let's look at it here in context. Shivat yamim masot tochelu achar medishon tashbitu som batechem. So we're going to eat for 7 days matzah, and the first day we're going to destroy any seor, which means sourdough, leaven, starter dough.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. You want to say something?
Yes, Rabbi. We make a point of selling the closet area or those shelves in the freezer to the goy as well. We actually rent it to them, so it shouldn't be officially in our possession as well.
Right. Good.
I think on the kitchen table or something like that would not meet
You
that.
sell the dishes that they're in? If it's in like a...
We don't sell any pots, any dishes. Whatever's hamets inside of it is batil, no longer any taste.
No, I'm saying if you have a jar, that's holding like a bread jar, for example. I don't know if there's such a thing even. That's holding your hamets. Do you sell the jar that it's sitting in if it's in the cabinet?
No, we rent the cabinet to the goy. Whatever.
Space. You rent the space where the chametz is.
Right.
But a cabinet might have some chametz and non-chametz, so you can still access the non-chametz in the cabinet.
Right.
So it's more like the area, the surface area where the chametz is. We are
That
renting
particular area of the shelf, but that one shelf, there might be other shelves in there. Yeah.
Right. Which does lead to a question. If you move chametz around, for example, sometimes people go to deal during Chol HaMoed, and so they sold everything, but they never cleaned up when they left before in the summer, and so then they go around and collecting everything and putting it into one closet. So I wonder about how that works, because now the space was sold, but now you moved it around. Okay, not sure how that would work. Okay, that's a good point. So Pasuk says, anyone who eats chametz in Nechatan Hashem Yisrael Meyom Rishon Ad Yom HaShvi'i Shivat Yamim Sor Lo Yimatzeh. Right. So leaven cannot be found in your houses, and anyone who eats it gets karet. For who does this apply to? Bager ube'ezrach haaretz. Ezrach haaretz is a citizen of the country, right? That's people that live there permanently. Ger is an immigrant, a resident immigrant. Someone that comes from a different country and now lives in Israel permanently. That's a ger, even though he's not Israelite, he's not Jewish. Ger in Torah doesn't mean a halachic convert. It means someone who comes and lives in Israel, and eventually they will join the nation. But right now, they're still an outsider status. There's kind of something in between, and yet they have to get rid of their chametz also.
Does this apply to us though?
You why?
Because we are neither ger or ezrach haaretz at this point.
Because you don't live in the land.
Yeah, it seems like
in other words, you're saying it looks like a law. Well, it says batechem, your homes. But there's a national status.
Here, ger and ezrach haaretz, and then later on it says chol gevulecha. It's more gevulecha feels more like
good. Right. So that was my next point.
Like my house.
Good. Later in Shemot, the next perek says, eat for matzot for 7 days. Velo yira'eh lecha. It should not be seen. Seor bechol gibulecha, and all of your boundaries. And so boundaries here, well, I don't know what boundaries of what, right? We already said your homes. So it's not only the boundaries of the home, but boundaries sounds like your territory, the land of Israel, right? And so that would make sense if you say it cannot be seen, it cannot be found at all, right? So if the law therefore was that for these 7 days, the entire land of Israel has to ban all chametz for all those both Israelite and non-Israelite that happen to be living there, have to get rid of all their chametz in the entire boundary. This would be like a prohibited substance during that time. And they check all the bags of anyone coming in. No chametz allowed. Chametz police gotta get rid of everything. And that way, wherever you were walking around, not only in your home but outside, there would be no pretzel stands. There would be no falafel stands. There would not be seen any chametz anywhere in Israel. Okay, so everybody agree with this interpretation? right? You see how the Pesukim seem to indicate that Devarim also. Lo yireh lecha, so b'chol givu lecha shivat yamim, in the entire land would not have any. This would be easier to do back then than nowadays. Nowadays we have a lot of packaged foods that can last a very long time, pasta and crackers and cereal. It'd be difficult to get rid of all of that. But in the olden days, when they just had basically bread, and bread would go stale in any case over a few days. So as long as you weren't producing new bread during this time, there basically wouldn't be any Hamets around. Okay, some of the reasoning we can understand why this law should be. If we remember that in the Bet HaMikdash, all year round, for nearly every type of korban, you had to bring matzah, and you could not bring chametz. Right? You're not allowed to bring chametz at all. This was in last week's parasha. Kol mincha shel lo te'aseh chametz. Chametz cannot be part of any korban in the time. So
Rabbi.
Yeah, the lechem panim.
What?
Rabbi, what is the proper way to view chametz? Because it's lechem oni, the poor man's bread, but at the same time, like you're saying in a korban, the process of fermentation, it's almost like a laziness that renders the korban with wheat less godly or pure for Hashem.
Good. So you're getting into a lot of the symbolism. My point here is that even without Pesach, any korban all year round can have chametz, right? And maybe very well for that very reason, because we have to put salt. Salt's a preservative. Hametz is a fermentation process that is degrading, that doesn't last, that spoils. And so we want to make sure our korban represents the berit that lasts forever, right? And not something that is short-term, that looks nice, but is going to spoil in a few days. So that very well may be the symbolism, but it's not particular to Pesach. It applies all year round to every korban in the Bet HaMikdash. And so therefore, this would make sense, because Korban Pesach is unique in that everyone brings it, and then everyone takes it. Well, they come to Jerusalem, and they are eating it on the outskirts of Jerusalem, right, wherever they put up their tent or find a hotel room. And so in a way, all of our homes, all the outskirts of the entire country become kind of like a Bet HaMikdash. We're all, in a way, like Kohanim, right? We're putting, in Egypt, they put the blood on their doorposts. Usually you put the blood on the Mizbeach. So now our doorposts, our homes become almost like a Mizbeach, right? And so we're taking this law that usually is particular to the Bet HaMikdash and expanding it to the whole country. Okay, so this seems to be the reasoning behind why there shouldn't be chametz, and so therefore it makes sense. Amos happens to also talk about people transgressing and they bring their sacrifices, and they're bringing leavened bread, right? There's a problem that they are bringing chametz with their sacrifices that they are not allowed to. So just yet
Rabbi, what about the lechem panim and the mincha offering? Isn't that chametz?
No, that was a also.
Huh?
That lasted 7 days. It was more like matzah.
Okay.
Okay. So good. So now, so far we've established. Joe, you mentioned another good point about lechem oni. Absolutely, right. This is also the bread of affliction that our forefathers ate. That's an added symbolism, right? I think the base symbolism is that this is not allowed with any korban. Maybe things that don't last a long time, as you said, and then it has added significance on Pesach specifically. All right, so now if we all accept that this is the original law, that it cannot be seen, literally you cannot see chametz on Pesach at all, or we can understand the following midrash. The Sifrei, source number 6, says, Lo yireh lecha seor, as quoting this pasuk here in Devarim. It says, Ro'eh ata la'acherim. So the Midrash says, Lo yireh lecha seor, you cannot see lecha seor, which it interprets as, you can't see your bread, but you can see the bread of others. So it's focusing on the word lecha to be a limiting word. Lo yireh lecha seor, you can't see your bread, but you can see bread that's like gavoa, that you donated to the Bet HaMikdash. right? In those times, you can go take anything and, say, this Sidur, I donated to the Bet HaMikdash. And then it becomes Hekdesh, it becomes holy, and doesn't belong to you, right? It becomes the property of the Bet HaMikdash. If you do that to a loaf of bread, then you don't own it. So you can have it around and see it and have it in your home, even on Pesach. Lo yere lecha se'od ro'eh ata b'platya. Platya is an Aramaic word that comes from Greek, like the English word plaza. You can't see yours, but you can see bread that's out in the public courtyard. If you don't own it, then you can see it. Okay, so this midrash is focusing on the word lecha to limit the law. And why is it doing that, right? We just saw that the peshat is not so. The peshat is you can't see any bread. The word lecha is actually a modifier of the verb. Lecha, lo yeda'eh lecha. You should not see any chametz. And what the midrash is, takes the word you, lecha, and attaches it to the next word, se'od. Do not see your se'od, right? Taking the word lecha and making it a modifier to se'od. This was pointed out in the book called Gan Eden by Aaron ben Eliyahu. He was born in the city in Turkey. He was a very famous Karaite, and he wrote this. He wrote a book. He wrote a couple of books. One, he wrote a copy of Moreh Nevuchim of the Rambam in the same structure, but arguing with Rambam's philosophy. That's a different book. In this book called Gan Eden, he talks about the Karaite halacha. And it describes all the derivation and the of what the halacha is according to the Karaites. Karaites, of course, those who follow only Torah shebichtav, only the Bible and not the oral law. And so he writes, Baalei Kabbalah, he doesn't mean the Kabbalists, he means the rabbis, those who have a tradition, an oral tradition. They say that when the Pasuk says, Lo yireh lecha, it means that he's quoting the Midrash, the Sifrei that we just had. He lived in the 1300s, by the way. And he says, this is the opposite of the meaning of the Pasuk. Because they, the rabbis, connected the word lecha with the word chametz, to say your chametz, even though in actual grammar, it's connected to the word yeda'eh as a verb, it's an adverb. You should not see any chametz at all. Okay, and so I think we would agree that that is the pshat, the simple meaning of the pasuk. And so now we should ask ourselves, why did the rabbis in the midrash remove it from the pshat?
So you can see that they're in a situation that's not of their own making, much as the last word of the sentence is not a Hebrew word. So they're not in control of the land anymore. And they're not the ones who can say, all right, just like they're not in control of their language, they have a foreign influence and they can't say there will be no more Hamets found in the land. So how do we do that? We just live with reality and live within the Torah.
Excellent, right. I love how you connected it with the Greek word that's in the sentence, right? So the rabbis are dealing with a new reality. Back in the first Bet HaMikdash, when we had our king, and the king could make a law for the land, and he could say, right, this is a control, Hametz is a controlled substance for these days. Anyone found with Hametz will be arrested. And so you can make a law like that. But then in the times of the rabbis are living under the Romans, and the Romans are in control of the land. And there are Greeks and Romans and all kinds of people living even within the land of Israel. So the rabbis, the Jews, do not have any power to make such a law. Furthermore, many Jews are living in lots of other places outside the land of Israel, living in Bavel or in Rome or wherever they're living. And it will obviously be impossible to make a law that no one in the city can have chametz. So therefore, we have a question: how can we apply the biblical law when we're living in New York and we don't have control to get rid of all chametz in the land? So a Karaite might say, "Oh, well, this is a problem. We can't do it. They don't have the tools to be able to apply the law in a flexible way that would make sense in the new reality of being in Galut." But the rabbis do. Through the power of Midrash, they can focus on this word lecha and give it a reinterpretation to say, listen, you can't worry about other people's chametz. You have no control over that. But you can still follow the biblical law by applying it just to yourself. In your domain, in your home, you cannot own chametz. So when it says chametz shall not be seen, doesn't technically mean that you can't see it at all. It means that you cannot possess it. You can't have any chametz. It can't be seen. It can't be found in your possession that you own. But if it belongs to someone else, if it's in their public area, then it's not your responsibility. You don't have to worry about it, right? So we see in this one midrash a fundamental shift, and this is a great example of the rabbis' forward thinking, and I think why they were uniquely successful among all the different groups and different interpretations that were around, from the Dead Sea sectarians and other people who went out of business, right, because they couldn't keep up with the changing times, but the rabbis did. And
so according to them, you can leave out the bottle of scotch and the pack of bread.
Exactly. If it's not yours, you can see it. Right?
So
the other interesting thing is that you see that the genesis of selling the Hamets here, right? So they talk about giving it away to like a boa. Yep.
Exactly. Very good.
But you don't see them able to sell it. Maybe there was still that tension within, okay, we have these people here who would rather not have here, and let's not involve them in our holiday. So we can give it away to Hashem, but you can't sell it yet to the Goy. But we acknowledge that the Goyim are going to have Hamets too.
Good. Okay, so now you mentioned selling, so I'm going to jump to that source, and if we have time, we'll come back to those previous sources. So what do we do about selling chametz? Here's a very interesting halacha. I'm going to skip to source number 14, which says, Barishona, in the beginning, at first. There's a bunch of mishnayot that start with this word Barishona, and these are always fascinating mishnayot because they tell us about the development of halacha. The Tanaim here are saying the halacha was once like this, but now it changed. In other words, from 1800 years ago, there was some change in halacha, and Mishnah is noting it. It says it used to be the halacha that they would say, Hayomrim, en mochrin chametz l'nochri, ben notnin lo b'matana, ela kedesh yoyechelenu, ad shelo tagia sha'at habi'ur. The halacha used to be that you cannot sell chametz, or give chametz to a non-Jew, unless there is enough time that he can consume it before the time that we have to burn it, right? Let's say the time we have to burn it is 10 a.m. on Wednesday, right? So if I have a whole case of beer and I go at 9:45 and I sell it to my non-Jewish neighbor, according to this original law, it's no good, because there's no way he could finish a case of beer in 15 minutes. I have to sell it to him several days before, enough time for him to sell it, right? Maybe if it's just a couple of cookies, so he can eat that in 15 minutes. But if I have, right, a whole box of pasta, this will take a long time. So this is very interesting. It means I'm responsible for my chametz even after I give it away or sell it. I don't have to go and make sure that he actually does destroy it. I have to give him the possibility of consuming it before it starts. Okay, so I think what we have here is a remnant of the original law that we have to get rid of all chametz. And so if I owned it ever, I have to look after it to make sure that at least there's a possibility that it was destroyed. Okay, that's a very interesting halacha. Until Rabbi Akiva came, and Rabbi Akiva is the one that changed it. He says, no, don't worry about it. He's mekel here. Okay, we got Rabbi Akiva in. Even though it's not our usual topic of the class. So Rabbi Akiva said, no, you can do it 1 minute before, sell them a whole pallet of chametz, it's okay. Says, actually, this is an older machloket between Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, and Rabbi Akiva is simply following Bet Hillel. In other words, he didn't actually fundamentally change the halacha. It was a controversy from before, although Bet Shammai usually tells us the older, more traditional opinion, and Bet Hillel was generally more innovative. And so Bet Shammai says, not only can't you own your own chametz, you have to make sure that the goy that you gave it to or sold it to also potentially got rid of it. Okay. So Mishnah, that's a Tosefta, and the Mishnah, which summarizes the Tosefta, doesn't mention anything about the original, and just says, anytime that you can eat it, you can also feed it to animals. You can also sell it to a non-Jew or give it to him. But once the time comes, then you can't do it anymore. So there you go.
The issue, though. It addresses the issue. What? By addressing the issue, you know that it was a question.
Right. To say that you can do it anytime. You can give it to any time that you're allowed to eat it. You can also give it away. right? So it's implying, and that's exactly what the Bavli says. You can sell it to a non-Jew. It says Peshita. Of course you can sell it to a non-Jew. Why would you think that at the time that you can eat it yourself, before 10 o'clock, why would you think that you couldn't sell it? Of course you could. To exclude the other opinion of Bet Shammai, who says you cannot sell your chametz to a non-Jew unless you know that he has time. You know that he will get rid of it, eat it before Pesach. And so Bet Hillel says you can do it anytime, right? So the Mishnah has to tell us this to exclude Bet Shammai. So even though the Mishnah, the Bavli is not quoting Tosefta, it is bringing it in, right? Even though the Mishnah summarized it, the Bavli is telling you why the Mishnah had to say that. But it adds another opinion that we didn't have before. The Biuda ben Betera says kutach. Kutach is a dish they used to have that's made of bread that soaks for a long time and it ferments, and it can last weeks and months. This dish, and so this could last a very long time and take a long time to eat. And so he says if you have some of this kutach, you have to sell it at least 1 month before Pesach, because it lasts so long and it will be a lot to eat. You have to get rid of it a long time before to make sure that the non-Jew would get rid of it. Okay, so here we have a remnant of the original law of that you are responsible even for chametz that you don't actually own currently. Okay, let me go back now to source number 11, which is quite kind of relevant to our time now. One time, Yisrael v'goy shubaim b'sfina v'chametz b'yad Yisrael. Let's say you're on a ship over Pesach, and so you might be on a long trip, maybe weeks or months, and you happen to be traveling, and Pesach is in the middle. And so now you're there. There's non-Jews on the boat, and you own chametz. What should you do? And now if you get rid of all your chametz, you throw it overboard, right? So they get rid of all the chametz, you can have a problem, because when Pesach is over, you're not going to have anything to eat. You can't go to a store. You can't order from Amazon when you're on the boat. So the Tosefta, and this is the first time we hear about selling. So in that case, you give it to, or sell it, or give it to the non-Jew who's on the boat with you, and then you can buy it back after Pesach, as long as it's a complete present. Not a present with any strings attached, not a present on condition that I'll get it back afterwards. You have to just give him all your chametz on the boat, and hopefully he'll be kind enough to sell it back to you. Otherwise, he's going to have to watch you starve on the boat. Okay.
When was that written?
This Tosefta is from the times of the Tanaim, around 200 CE.
Got it.
Got it. So this is the first time as we talk about selling chametz. In a case where you see you really need it, right? It wouldn't be needed if you're living on land and you can go and just get more chametz, bake more, buy more. It wouldn't be a problem.
But isn't there a condition within that, maybe implicitly, that he can't really use the chametz because I kind of need it after the holiday?
So that's the thing. You can't make a condition, and that's why it adds as long as it has to be a complete sale, right? I mean, you're running a risk. It's true. Potentially, he can take this chametz and throw it overboard, eat it all himself, and you wouldn't have it. But it's
not a written condition. But he's your buddy. He knows that you're on this boat. He knows that you're in a unique circumstance, and he probably won't use it, even in a written condition. I mean, it seems implicit within the sale.
Good. I mean, you can make a sale for the actual worth of it. So you can, this is the box of spaghetti or whatever. This is $5. That's the real price. So then he'll have incentive to keep it so that he can get the money back, right? And maybe have to pay a little more. So you can do it that way. All right, the Ben Yerucham and Bet Yosef and Shulchan Aruch then give the Psak Halacha in this way. He says, as long as you don't use a trick. And he says, what does it mean don't do a trick? There's no greater trick than this, that you're giving to him present and he knows that you're going to buy it after. So what do you mean don't use trickery? And so it must mean that you shouldn't do it on condition. And Shulchan Aruch therefore says the same thing. Hamets sheYisrael shavala Pesach machlo. If you sold it beforehand, even though everybody knows that he's going to save it for you until after Pesach, mutar is still allowed, as long as it's a complete present without any condition. Okay, so but if there is a condition, that's not a problem. So Shulchan Aruch says if it's an arrangement, even though everybody knows you're going to buy it back, it's still okay because it's not yours. You don't own it. It's not in your possession, and therefore you don't have to worry about it. And so this is the source of selling chametz. I think that when we look at the original case of being on a boat, this is similar to our situation now, where after Pesach it may be difficult to just go to a supermarket and buy up the chametz. And so for those who are worried about how we're going to get chametz afterwards, I think this year in particular, the original spirit of this law applies this year more than usual. Okay, so that's a bunch of sources that show there's a remnant of the original law, and I'd like to now show you something really fascinating from archaeology. That's somewhere in between. It's before Chazal, before the rabbinic sources, and after the biblical sources. And this is from a group of Jews that was living around 400 BCE, a really long time ago, in the middle of Egypt, an island called Elephantine. Has anybody heard of this group?
I have.
We went to the Brooklyn Museum with Rabbi Shammai years ago.
That's right. You remember that? Very good. And Professor Sober, right? We had a
Right.
Excellent. Right. Okay. So
They made korbanot over there also, right?
They did. Very good. Good memory. Right. That's right. The archaeologists found some papyri there that most of them are held in the Brooklyn Museum. That's an interesting story how they got to the Brooklyn Museum, but they are still there now. I think about 1 or 2 are on permanent display, and a few years ago they were all on a special display. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of background about this group and and then I'll show you how it's relevant to Pesach. So if you go to Egypt now, you can go here in the middle of the Nile, this little island. There's hotels there. It's a resort town, a nice place to go on a trip. We know that Jews went down to Egypt. Yirmiyah mentions Jews going down to Egypt. Yeshaya mentions Jews that are there as well. And the story of how they got there goes back to 650 BCE, right? Way in the middle of the first Bet HaMikdash. The king Menashe had an alliance with the king of Paro, right? The king of the Jews, and Paro had an alliance. And so Menashe, the king of Judea, sent some soldiers down to Egypt to help out a war that was going on in Egypt, to help the Egyptian army. Right? This was, and so they went down there, and then they stayed, and they had families in Egypt. So this was a soldier town, an elephant. Back then it was called Yeb, and they were living there as Jews, and they kept their identity for hundreds of years, right? All the way there, and they wrote letters back and forth to Israel, to the governors in Israel, and to the Kohen Gadol in Israel. And so we have those letters. They were sitting there in this little town. We don't hear much about them after the 4th century. We don't see what happened to them. Some people surmise that maybe they traveled further down to Ethiopia, and maybe that's the origin of the Ethiopian Jews or others, but that's just a guess. So if you go there, you can see the archaeological site. This is it. And if we reconstruct what this looked like, right, if you just build up those walls that we found, it seems to have looked something like this. What's a lot like
Mikdash, Bet Mikdash.
Yeah, like our Bet HaMikdash, right? So in other words, when they went there, this was way before there was a concept of a Bet Knesset that would be a place of tefillah and study. So when they went down there, like, oh, we're Jews, we have to worship Hashem. They mentioned Yud Ke Vav Ke in their letters. How are we going to do that? The only way they know is through sacrifices. And so they built a little temple, a little Bet HaMikdash there, and gave sacrifices. And we know that because in one of the letters, it says, the local Persian, this is during Persian period, right? The Persians are in charge in Israel and Egypt. The Persians own the whole empire. And the Persians kept the peace between different religions. But one day, the local Persian governor went away on a trip. And the other Egyptian priests took advantage of that and came and destroyed the Jewish Bet HaMikdash. Seemed to have been some tension between different religions. And the Jews, therefore, were very sad. So we have no Bet HaMikdash, and they wrote a letter to the Kohen Gadol saying, can you help us rebuild our Bet HaMikdash? And they get no response. And so they sent a letter to the Persian governor in Judea, in Samaria, saying, can you help us build the Bet HaMikdash? And they were never able to rebuild it. It seems that the Kohen Gadol didn't respond because he didn't want them to be offering sacrifices outside the Bet HaMikdash in Jerusalem. This is not allowed. But they seem, in Egypt, they didn't seem to have gotten that memo, and so they wanted to rebuild it. They never ended up rebuilding it. But it's fascinating that they were offering sacrifices down there. Okay, it's not even the only Bet HaMikdash that offered sacrifices in Egypt. There was another one that came later during the times of the Hashmonaim. One of the Kohanim who was kicked out went down to another place in Egypt and made another Bet HaMikdash. So there's a whole story about these things. Okay, this is a copy of the papyrus requesting a permission to rebuild another temple to Yud Kevav in Elephantine. It's a bit hard to read, but you can see it's actually just a regular Hebrew.
I'm not seeing it on the screen, Rabbi.
You're not
It's
seeing it?
amazing.
Huh?
It hasn't, nothing's come up on the screen.
Can anybody else see it on the screen?
I see it.
It's on our screen.
I can see it.
Your
I can
setting
see
is
it.
off.
I guess you excluded me. Okay.
Try
Try to
a
slide.
computer. It might be better than an iPhone.
Okay. All right. Well, next
Okay.
time.
But I'll tell you what's here. So this is the one called the Elephantine Passover Papyrus. This is a little bit more fragmentary, but you can
I got it now.
the letters if you look carefully. And here it is in English. And here's what it says: to my brother Yedanya. This is a letter, right, dated to 419, I think, BCE. 419 BCE. This is really old, okay? Just for
How did it date at 419 BCE? What were they counting down to? Do they have any idea?
Yeah, it says it's the 5th year of Darius.
Okay.
Hey, there's a date in the letter. It's
They didn't,
unbelievable.
they didn't include 419 in the letter. That was not.
No, it doesn't say 419.
Okay.
Of course not.
BCE before 300 years after Yeshua. That's when they started even thinking about counting from that. So no, they wouldn't write that. But this is a dated thing, right? Which is amazing because most archaeological finds doesn't have a date on it. We have to guess. This is wonderful. So for perspective, I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls that are like our oldest things ever, 2,000 years old. This is 400 years older than most of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay. So this is absolutely amazing. And this is a letter written by the Kohen Gadol. It's maybe in his own handwriting, or maybe his scribe that he's dictating it to, right? This is the actual letter that the Kohen Gadol sent, and we still have. So unbelievable to have a letter from the early period of the second Bet HaMikdash in existence. You can go, it's right here down the block in Brooklyn. You can go there and request it and hold it. Okay, so this is what he says to Yedanya and the garrison of Jews, you guys who live in Egypt, peace. And then he says, now, listen, you should count 14 days in Nisan, and on the 14th day at twilight, you have to observe Passover. From the 15th day to the 21st day of Nisan, observe the holy day of unleavened bread, which means making a distinction between Chag HaPesach and Chag HaMasot, appropriately, as the Torah does. Chag HaPesach, technically, we call the whole thing Pesach, but technically Pesach is the first night, when we have the Korban Pesach, when we have the Seder, and the rest of the 7 days is called Chag HaMasot. So he's giving them the dates. No Yom Tov Sheni. No, that didn't start yet. 7 days, eat unleavened bread. Now be pure and careful not to do work on the 15th and the 21st days. First day and last day, no work. The middle, Chol HaMoed. All beer you shall not drink. All matter of leaven you shall not eat. And it may not be seen in your houses from the 14th day at sundown until the 21st day at sundown. All leaven which you have in your houses, lock inside your storage rooms and seal it up between these days. So what do you find is interesting about this letter?
You can own it, but you can't see it.
It
And
seems that you can own it, right? Just
Yeah.
lock it up. It doesn't say drink it. It doesn't say
Or
burn
sell
it. It doesn't say sell it. It just says lock it.
Lock it away.
So how is he interpreting the Pesukim?
Don't see it.
Right? Lo yada'eh. Taking it literally. Do not see it. Right? And so again, he's in Jerusalem, and maybe in Jerusalem he's able to get rid of all Hamets, but he's writing this letter for this exilic community, and that's how he's explaining it. So here again, we can see a transition point between the biblical law that applies in Israel and the rabbinic law that applies everywhere, right? And saying, lock it up, don't see it. I think this is absolutely fascinating because, as Joe and several people said, nowadays, Rabbi Barry said, our custom is to lock it up and not see it. Now, technically, halachically, we don't need to, yet we still all do it. And so maybe, I think this is true, the locking it up and hiding it away is actually the older part of what we do, and the selling is a more technical thing that developed later on the boat, right, that the rabbis were talking about, because you're going to see it, it's around, but not to own it. So a lot of times there's a custom, there's a practice that we copy. We just see our parents and grandparents, this is the way it was done, and we continue doing it. And so this is the way that it was continued to have done for centuries and centuries, to lock it up, make sure not to see any chametz that you own. And then added to that is also, you really can't own it besides not seeing it. And so we do it this way. Okay, I also think it's fascinating here that this letter seems to be very basic. I mean, doesn't everybody know when Pesach is? Right? Couldn't they didn't know this before? It seems like, here's the 14th day, 15th day, this is what you should do. It looks to me like from this letter, like these people had no idea what Pesach was. Had no idea about the date and the details. I mean, this is it's not like, detailed halacha until it gets to the end, but very basic things. And maybe we're surprised by that, but maybe not.
well, it seems
And
like
they don't have 2 days, and they're outside the Hamets.
Right. Obviously, they don't have 2 days because that whole system of Yom Tov Sheni, right, is not around yet.
Pesach, they seem to know. Haga Masot seems to be less known.
Right. So maybe they know. Maybe they know about Pesach, but listen, also 7 day, first day, last day, no chametz in between. Right? They don't seem to notice. Okay. So I think it's not so surprising because we all know about in the story at the end of Melachim when they found the Torah. Right? And they start reading it, but no one knows about it. And it says, "Oh look, it says we have to keep Pesach." Right? It says, "Oh, they go and keep Pesach like they never did before in a long time." And with Sukkot, in the beginning of the second Bet HaMikdash, in the book of Ezra Nehemiah, says Ezra read the Torah for them, and then that is, so you have to go make Sukkot. And they made Sukkot, and they hadn't done it since the time of Yehoshua, right? Thus, we have other stories, even within Israel, that a lot of these very basic things were forgotten. Because in the first Bet HaMikdash, many of the kings were corrupt and were following Avodah Zarah. And therefore, it's only after this revival, when they rediscovered the Torah, that they implemented this. So my guess is that in the beginning of second Bet HaMikdash, when the Nehemiah came and taught the people, and they didn't know anything, and then the leaders had to teach all the rest of the people, hey, some basic things, some holidays. So now, about maybe just a while later, Ezra Nehemiah were in 450. This is 30 years after Ezra Nehemiah brought the Torah to Israel and taught the people who were Amei Haaretz, who knew almost nothing. So you can see a direct link. Ezra Nehemiah, a lot of us studied it together. Ezra Nehemiah comes, they bring a Torah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. They teach the people, and the people have no idea what it's in it, and they start learning it, and they start doing Sukkot and all the basic things. Rosh Hashanah, they know about Rosh Hashanah in the beginning of Second Bet HaMikdash. 30 years later, the Kohen Gadol says, we have to teach this to all the Jews, not only in Jerusalem, but everywhere. And he's in contact with these Jews in Egypt. So he writes them a letter. Listen, maybe you don't have a whole Sefer Torah back over there, but here's some basic laws you need to know, right? In the first and seventh, here's Pesach, and then I presume they start doing it, right? So you can actually see how the knowledge of Torah was spread during this time through letters, Kohen Gadol being not only charged of Bet HaMikdash, but also responsible for all Jews around the world. Okay, so I think that's absolutely fascinating. And any questions about that?
What's the distinction between Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach? That Ezra said that they might know about one, but not the other.
Good. So Pesach refers to the Korban Pesach, right? That's when we actually eat the Korban. That starts on the 14th in the afternoon. That's when people would come to the Beit HaMikdash and bring the Korban and offer it, and then it would go through twilight and continue in the nighttime when people would make the seder. They would eat the Pesach with the maror and with the matzah and tell the story, just like we do. And that would end around midnight. Okay, so it would be the afternoon until the night. That's Pesach, just a few-hour holiday. Once you finish eating the Korban Pesach, Pesach is over. Right, so that's technically what Pesach is. Chag HaMatzot is a 7-day holiday. And look into that carefully. Look at the readings that we're going to be reading coming, and you'll see that distinction between Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach.
Are there other cultures in the ancient Near East that had similar holidays of unleavened bread to commemorate some sort of like farming holiday?
Not that I know of. I mean, every culture has some kind of agricultural holiday around this time when everything's beginning to grow. But do they celebrate it with unleavened bread? I don't know of any such thing.
Because I'm wondering if it's the fusing of two separate holidays, one commemorating Exodus and another just like a typical rote farming holiday, that then the narratives of the two end
Or
up.
do you think maybe it's one pastoral nomad versus farming holiday?
Right, that end up fusing is what I'm saying.
Right.
The narratives of the two.
Yeah, for sure. There's an international agricultural holiday, and then the Torah adds a historical perspective, right? That we're also celebrating a national celebration, origin narrative that's added onto that natural and then historical are added on together. Whether that maps onto Chag HaMatzot and then Chag HaPesach, I think that's a very interesting conjecture.
Is it a coincidence that we start counting the Omer also, like the second night?
Good. No, not a coincidence at all,
Yeah.
right? That's exactly that connects Matzot, connects whatever we call it, Pesach with Shavuot. Pesach is when the barley, around Pesach time is when the barley starts grows, and Shavuot is when the wheat grows. So we're counting down the seasons in between.
Because Rabbi, most people have very little knowledge or appreciation of matzah in terms of its technical significance. In the, like you were saying before, that really you can never have Hamets in the Beit HaMikdash, and that fermentation renders that korban a little less precious. Most people really only know it as lechem oni, but I think you need both.
Absolutely, very good. Yeah, I have a proposal. I think that, when we send kids to Israel to study for a year in yeshiva, maybe they should spend a year on a farm first, right? Because really to understand the Torah and Halacha, and then what the Beit HaMikdash was like, you really have to understand plants and olive trees and animals, and you get that background, right? Spend a year on a kibbutz, and then go to yeshiva, and everything will be in much better context.
Or herding animals.
Yes.
Shepherding.
Right. We did a couple of years ago. Z was there, and we herded some sheep, and that was a real experience. It was not easy, I have to tell you, right? We were pushing them and prodding them and yelling at them, and they would not go. It simply would not go where we wanted them to. And then one of the guys told me a trick. He says, go in front of the sheep, right, and walk and say, boy, boy. Apparently the sheep in Hebrew, in Israel know Hebrew. So I tried that. I went in front of them and just said, boy, didn't look back. And they all followed, so, like sheep. So that was
Rabbi, I remember that very clearly. We were there together at that time.
Yeah, right. Okay, that was a fun day. All right, if you have a little bit more energy, I'd love to show you another fascinating source. Yeah, you with me?
Yeah.
Okay, and so that is going back. I'm looking for remnants in early layers of the Talmud of the original law that you can't own any chametz. And so here's one, source number 8. It says, Lo yereh from Talmud Yerushalmi, Lo yereh lecha, it tanayeh taneh. There are some tanaim, there are some reciters who say the follows. A tana is a professional memorizer. He sits there and repeats the oral law all day long. And these are people that had fantastic memories. They weren't necessarily the best analyzers. We didn't want them to be analyzers. They're just a human book. They walk around and memorize all of the traditions. And so there were many memorizers, and hopefully they had the same version, but sometimes they had different versions of the same tradition. And so here we quote of it. Itaneh taneh, lo yireh lecha, lecha en ata roeh, aval roeh ata lagavoa. Some people said you cannot own it, you cannot have chametz of your own, but you can you can have chametz as long as it belongs to somebody else. And itaneh taneh, afilu lagavoa. Another Tana said you cannot have chametz even if you make it ekdesh. Even if it doesn't belong to you, even if you sell it, you cannot have it in your possession. So in other words, you see that the other version here, afilu lagavoa, is telling us the original Torah law, that even if you gave it away, you still cannot have it in your possession. Okay? That's the original law. Now, the Talmud Yerushalmi then harmonizes it and says, well, no, they're not really arguing. The one who says, the one who said that you can get rid of it, that's when you got rid of it before the time when you have to burn it. Whereas the other one that says afilu lagavoa is when you try to make it ekdesh after the time that you need to burn it. In other words, if after 10 o'clock, sometime in the afternoon, you have chametz there that you're violating, you're not allowed to own the chametz anymore after the middle of the day. And then you say, oh, ekdesh. Oh, no, then it's no good. You can't make it ekdesh after you're already not allowed to own it yourself. And so that's what this other Tana was talking about. They're talking about two different time periods, but the two Tanaim actually agree. So that's how the Yerushalmi tries to harmonize that. But we can see that this is an artificial harmonization, because it doesn't say anywhere in these two traditions that is the case. So if we remove that layer of interpretation, we can go back and see there were two Tannaitic sources, two opinions. One said you can see it if you don't own it. The other said you cannot see it even if you don't own it. Okay, so that's how we do some archaeology on the Talmudic text. One more case, and we'll end with this example. This is a fascinating case, and we need a little bit of a background to understand what this is talking about. If you make dough, you make challah on Pesach. Okay, you're allowed to cook on Pesach, and you're allowed to make matzah on Pesach. Most of us don't usually do that because it's complicated to keep all the laws of kashrut when you're doing that. But technically you can. If you make a big dough like we do today, then you have to take challah off from it. And nowadays, if someone's making dough, they take challah and they just put it in tin foil and burn it and throw it away because we was the same way that we did. But in those days, you'd actually give it to a kohen, right? And Z could enjoy some of your dough. He gets it for free. Okay, so that's all understandable. Now, challah has to be eaten in tahara. The kohen has to be tahor when he eats it, and the challah has to be tahor. If someone who's tameh comes and touches it, it's no good, and then the kohen can't enjoy it anymore. So usually you would burn it, okay, like we do today. Because we're all tameh, that's why we can't keep challah today. You just have to burn it. Now, here's the case. It's Yom Tov, and I'm baking matzah, and I take some challah, and I am tameh. There's a problem. If I was tahor, I could have separated, put it all in the oven, bake matzot, take the matzah that I separated for challah and give it to the kohen, and he could eat it. But now that it's tameh, I can't do that anymore. So am I allowed to bake it? Well, I'm allowed to cook on Yom Tov if I'm going to eat it. But if I can't eat it, I can't bake it either. So I have this dough that's tameh. I can't put it in the oven and bake it because I'm not allowed to cook on Yom Tov, something that I can't eat, and nobody can eat this. I can't eat it because I'm not a kohen. Kohen can't eat it because it's tameh. So what should I do? Should I leave it out? What happens if I leave it out?
Somebody made it. It's Hekdesh.
It becomes Hamets.
Comes chametz, and I have chametz over here. This is no good either, right? So this is a quandary, right? Because I want to make a nice big dough, but it's tameh, and I don't know what to do with the challah. So that's the question of the Mishnah.
Can you make it unedible?
Don't look.
Like just add something to make it unedible,
Make it unedible. Okay, good. Take the dough and do something. Good.
Mhm.
Let's see. Yeah, that's one of the options. That's a good
Mhm.
idea. Let's look at what the options are. כיצד מפרישים חלה בטומאה ביום טוב? רבי אליעזר אומר, לא תקרא להשם עד שתאפה. He says you do the following. You separate challah, but don't call it challah. Don't say this is going to be challah. Just say this is a separate item. Bake everything. After it's baked, you take that small piece and say, this is challah. So that's why it's already baked. Okay? So at the time I'm baking it, it's all edible, and I can separate it after it's baked. Okay, that's one option. Rabbi Yehuda ben Petah says, tatil betzonen. This is similar to Moses' idea that you would put it in cold water. You take dough and put it in cold water, it won't ferment. Okay, also destroy it in some other way. So that's fine. Leave it in cold water. Rabbi Yoshua says, "Lo zeu chametz shemuzarim alav bebal yireh bal yimatzeh, ela befarashta manachta da'erev im hachmitza hachmitza." He says this is not what the category of what chametz applies to in bal yireh, because it's not mine. Rather, so because I already gave it to the kohen. I mean, I didn't give it to him, but I separated it as challah, so it's not mine anymore. So therefore, I can just leave it out on the table, and if it becomes chametz, it becomes chametz. Not my problem. What you see here is that only Rabbi Yoshua takes the simple solution, which is halachically allowed according to our understanding of halacha. He says, you take this chametz, you leave it there. It doesn't belong to me, so I don't care about it. Why is it a problem at all? So now we have to ask, how come the first two opinions of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehuda ben Petah didn't say the same thing? Why didn't they say a simple thing? Just leave it there. It's not a problem in the first place. Why do they have to do this thing where you go backwards and you separate it, but don't call it challah or put it in sunan? Why bother? It means that the first two opinions think that you are responsible. Even though you separated it and it's not yours anymore, you still cannot have it there in your home. You still violate. In other words, the first two Tanaim are still following the original old halacha that you're responsible for any chametz in your domain, in your possession, even if you don't own it. It's only Rabbi Yoshua that comes and says, not a problem, don't worry about it. So we can see here the transition between the first law and the second law, and I can prove that this was behind their reasoning because in the Tosefta version of the Mishnah, again, the Tosefta is also a collection of Talmudic sources that's parallel to the Mishnah, but adds in a lot more reasons and, in this case, dialogue. Rabbi Eliezer tells Rabbi Yoshua, how do you say, this is how can you separate this case, challah on Yom Tov, if you can't have it in your house? Rabbi Yoshua says, only that which you cannot eat, you have to worry about. What you can eat, but this one I can't eat, it's not mine, I don't care about it, don't worry about it. And so he says, well, there's two Pesukim, how are you going to know which one it is? Which one you're going to follow? And he says, when I do it and it's mine, then I violate when it's mine, because it's mine. But if I leave it and it's not mine, then I don't have to worry about it. So it explicitly explains the reasoning behind it. Okay, so let's just summarize what we've seen. In the original Torah law, chametz is something to do with all korbanot all year round in the Bet HaMikdash, and Korban Pesach is special because everyone is involved, and so it becomes like a whole nation. All of our homes become like a mizbeach, and therefore we can have chametz anywhere in the entire land of Israel. It's a banned substance, and that's why it cannot be found. It cannot be seen. You would not see any chametz originally. When it comes, then we come chronologically to the Persian period, in Elephantine down in Egypt. The Kohen Gadol is writing them a letter. He can't tell them get rid of all chametz in Egypt, so he says, don't see it, put it away. And that's the way that you can at least apply the Torah law bal yira'eh, just close it up and don't see it. That's what he's focusing on. And then when it comes to rabbinic times, in early rabbinic times, they say, listen, you're still responsible. Even if you don't own it, it's a problem. You gotta destroy it. Even if you sell it to a non-Jew, you have to sell it 30 days before or enough time that he can consume it, right? And so you gotta really, as much as you can, get rid of all Hamets. But then the Hillel comes, the Akiva comes, the Yoshua comes, and they say, if you don't own it, you can sell it 1 minute before. All that matters is ownership, not seeing. Don't worry about it. Seeing means don't see something that you own. Should not be seen, should not be found, not literally seen. And that becomes the story that they do on the boat back then, and that becomes the halacha today. And that's why we're able to still continue celebrating Pesach. And so while we're in a very different state, we don't have, well, actually now, technically, if we had maybe enough religious parties won in the Knesset, they could vote and make a law, no Hamets in the land of Israel, right? But despite the fact that we're living in different times, we don't have the Bet HaMikdash, we still can sit and celebrate and talk about Korban Pesach almost as if it's in front of us. We can talk about the symbolism. We can make a sandwich, even though the sandwich has just lettuce and no meat, right? Kind of like a pastrami sandwich with no pastrami, right? But it's okay. We still make the sandwich, even though it's empty, because it's full of meaning. We just remember, we kind of make believe that there's the shawarma in there, that there's Korban Pesach in there. And so that's the rabbi's great insight into adjusting the needs and adjusting the interpretations of the Pesukim. I think the word lecha, listen, you can't get rid of all chametz, but you get rid of your chametz, and that's sufficient. And that gives us the ability nowadays to be able to live wherever we live, and there may be chametz all around us, but it's not ours, we don't have to worry about it, and therefore we can even be in our homes, but we sell the closet, we sell the chametz, and we don't own it, and therefore we don't have to worry about it. And so that's the long story of chametz.
So it's interesting how this selling of the Hamets seems to have uncomfortably evolved, right? The earlier sources don't really talk about it. They talk about giving it away, and maybe some people will have it. And then you see that people were selling it, but they were doing it in like this odd way that they could only sell it if it wouldn't survive until the time of Pesach, and then maybe before the Biur, and then Rabbi Akiva comes along, who's the great innovator, and then makes just everything allowed. But before that, you see kind of like it was contortionism to be able to sell Hamets.
Yeah, exactly.
And then with regard to Elephantine, there's just a side question there. Did they bring Israelite women there, or did they just marry the Egyptian women?
Yeah, that's hard to know. I'm not sure if we have enough evidence to answer that question.
I mean, it seems like if you're sending troops, right, they don't send their wives as well.
Right.
Comparison.
Yeah. So but they did have continued their identity, their biblical identity, as worshipers of Hashem for a long time. So
Right.
a foreign woman, Egyptian woman, which
Things are patrilineal then also, right?
Yeah, so they somehow brought those women over into their communities. Whether they considered patrilineal descent or did some kind of conversion, we don't know. But they were able to have continuity of identity, even if they were marrying locals. That's a great point.
Wonderful. Hazaku
All right.
Baruch.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Rabbi, how can we access this recording?
I can send it to you.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Chag Sameach.
Have a good day, Rabbi.
Mincha 7:15 today.
Okay.
And I'll
Rabbi,
send out
thank you.
the announcement.
Okay. Hopefully see you at 7:15, Rob.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Rabbi.